So today, for our scholar, we're going to be talking about Willie James Jennings. Hey everyone, welcome back to Apocalypse here. Today we're going to be doing another Scholar Spotlight video. Our Scholar Spotlight series is a way for us to introduce you to scholars you may not have heard of. So we'll introduce who they are, give them some context in terms of where they're situated in the scholarly landscape, what they study, what they're interested in, and then we will go over either a topic or a theme. So today, for our scholar, we're going to be talking about Willie James Jennings. Willie Jennings is Associate Professor of Systematic Theology and Africana Studies at Yale Divinity School in New Haven, Connecticut. Jennings received his BA from Calvin College, his Master of Divinity from Fuller Theological Seminary, and his PhD in religion from Duke University, where he specialized in theology and ethics. He's also an ordained Baptist minister. Before taking up his current post at Yale, Jennings taught theology and Black church studies for 25 years at Duke Divinity School. I was fortunate enough to take classes with him during his last few years at Duke. Just to give kind of a scholarly interest, Jennings has and continues to write within areas of liberation theologies, cultural identities, anthropology, geography, and education, with over 40 peer-reviewed articles and several blog posts on religion dispatches. Jennings' most widely known and praised monograph is his 2010 The Christian Imagination, Theology, and the Origins of Race, which received the 2015 Grawemeyer Award for outstanding work in the field of religion. He's also written a commentary on the book of Acts. He's written a book on education called After Whiteness, and he's currently working on a book on the doctrine of creation. But today, to introduce y'all to Jennings' work, we're going to go over his chapter in the Blackwell Companion to Christian Ethics called Being Baptized Race. This will actually give you a good taste of what's in all three of his published monographs, so I figured that would be a good place to start. To begin, Jennings helps us see the origins of race in the modern world and its connection to Christianity by pointing us to the time of the New World Conquest. People we would now call Europeans began entering areas of Africa, Asia, and the Americas, and brought with them a desire for new wealth and resources in land and labor and, of course, money. And Christianity was right at the center of this, as sort of driving the engine of those entering into other people's lands. The church wanted the world to be baptized into its conception of faith. Conquest opened up for the church a way of viewing other people and places as sheep to come under the church's care and the church's care alone. As Jennings writes, quote, "The driving concern for the salvation of the world that lay at the heart of the gospel became, when viewing the New World, a breathtaking radicalism which blew through the tribal, linguistic, and geographical specifics of every people," end quote. So these parts of people's identity, language, tribal allegiances, geography, land, were considered irrelevant and needed to be broken away from in the light of the gospel. All people affected by this quote-unquote conquest baptism were now bound to a new matrix of identity that flowed from sinner to saint, reprobate to elect, irredeemed to redeemed. Now, this way of understanding identity didn't happen by accident. It unfortunately has theological rationale, as Jennings points out. When an account of creation ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, and its implication for the creature, that the creature is wholly dependent on God, when this is read in a certain way, it can facilitate looking at people as being fundamentally detached from their habitation, from their place, from daily practices and rituals, even from animals. All that matters is their inherent sinfulness and their need for forgiveness and an abstract salvation from God that kind of floats above contingent and concrete realities. And so the church, representing the one in whom all things hold together, namely Jesus Christ, took this ownership and authority over peoples and lands. But there was, of course, a brutal material enactment of this claim to divine ownership. Slavery was, of course, not new, but now it becomes bound up with the church's expansion and its market desire in the New World. And it also was now being filtered through a different way of viewing the world. those who brought people from the new to the old world, as it were, began describing and seeing them in terms of black and white, and in between black and white. So this racial designation, white, black, in between, paralleled and interpenetrated with the theological designation of sinner, saint, reprobate, elect, possessed, exorcised, in a way that also sought to transcend linguistic, cultural, geographical, and tribal affiliations. People from vastly different ways of life, spaces, and places are now categorized on the scale from lesser, i.e. black, on the one hand, to better and truly human as you get toward white on the other. Now, Jennings covers quite a lot of important historical and theological connections in this chapter, but I want to focus on a key part of his diagnosis of the formation of the racial world, and then give a sense of his way forward. So Jennings sees whiteness and blackness are bound together, but it's important to understand how whiteness functions at two levels, and this is something that a lot of people miss when talking about whiteness, and I think where some of the confusion comes in. At a first level, whiteness refers to the very process that we were just talking about of viewing, identifying, and comparing, and then marking people as white or almost white or anything sort of in between. At its second level, it creates the conditions for how the lives of people, especially indigenous people, would unfold on that trajectory of comparison. This way of viewing and marking and comparing people and creating the conditions for their lives on that trajectory, of course, disrupted the lives and well-being of communities who were living in very different ways deeply connected to land, to people, to place, because it basically says to them, that's not really what your life is all about. What it's really all about is what I, the church, essentially, say it is, according to the way we've marked and categorized you. So Jennings writes, quote, if, for example, your vision of growth, maturity, leadership, and community all depended on the hunting of buffalo in a particular land shaped by life coordinated around specific mountains, plains, valleys, plants, and bodies of water, what would happen to you and your people when the buffalo were taken and you were removed from that land? Then who would you be? Who would you become? End quote. So as you can probably tell, whiteness is much more comprehensive than something like European hegemony or white supremacy can grasp, really. It's a way of viewing what is normal and good, regardless of particularity or distinctiveness, and at the same time, it creates what is abnormal and different and therefore bad. Whiteness is an imagination. But even with this racial condition, Jennings rightly points out that there have always been moments of hope, of a different way of life that the church so often overlooks, having been captured by this racial imaginary. Indigenous and slave life, for example, chose by way of necessity what Jennings calls Baroque existence. By Baroque, he means, quote, forms of mixture, cultural, social, physical, spatial, architectural, and artistic, that lumped, layered, or wove together different, distinct, sometimes oppositional, even inappropriate materials, thought forms, rituals, physical gestures, language, and life patterns to create unanticipated forms of expression and existence. End quote. This Baroqueness, this kind of mixture, mixing, combining, joining, is where, for Jennings, the Spirit of God moves to reconcile all flesh through Jesus Christ. In fact, this Baroque character has been at the very basis of our Christian faith all along. We Gentiles were joined to a Jewish hope as outsiders through a Jewish Messiah. We were brought near to a story in a world that was not our own. It's this mixed salvation, right? Remember Andrew's paper. If you haven't watched the Spotlight video on Andrew Rivera, this is a good reason to do it. Andrew sees a kind of socio-political salvation where it's this mixed salvation of Jews and Gentiles not leaving behind their distinctiveness, but coming together and joining and witnessing as this one new humanity. So it's this mixed salvation that generates Baroque Christianity. It's the mixed character of this that the colonial moment refused and tried to destroy. But we don't have to. In closing, the contemporary church carries this profound struggle to figure out how to navigate life together. And for Jennings, it's only when we're able to renounce the determinative power of whiteness, its way of viewing, categorizing, and conditioning life in the world, that has been at the center of Christian identity for far too long. And we need to turn to being in the business of joining, not assimilating or obliterating difference, but joining both to other people and to land and space and place so that we can witness faithfully to the God revealed in Jesus Christ. And this God revealed in Christ was never in the business of despising our utter difference or our estranged condition, but made it his own, joined to it, and in turn gave us his life to join to. So that's an overview of Jennings's chapter in the Blackwell Companion to Christian Ethics called Being Baptized, Race. I hope you learned something from this video, and I hope it piqued your interest in reading more of Willie Jennings. I'll put links to his books in the description of this video. I'll also put some links to his more popular level work on religion dispatches and other online sources as well. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to the channel. Be on the lookout for more Scholar Spotlight videos to come. Take a look at our Patreon, patreon.com/apocalypse here, if you want to support us in that way. And with that, this has been Apocalypse Here, Christianity you can live with.